Hi guys, Jay Nolson here once again, and I've got a bit of a different video today. Today is talking about the JLPT, the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, the Nihongo no Rokushiken. And I think every time I start a video, the first thing my dog does is try to get into frame. Well, first of all, I should explain what the JLPT is for those who don't know. There is this test which is basically supposed to test your proficiency in the Japanese language. It has reading and it has listening. There's no writing or speaking section. The reading is split up into grammar, language, knowledge or vocabulary and stuff like that. And then there's a bit of listening. It's split into 5 levels, N5 being the lowest, N1 being the highest. And if you want to work in a Japanese company, they recommend you get N2 because, especially recently, there has been new rules around visas where if you're working in a job that requires Japanese, you have to have N2. Though I'm sure there's a lot of ways to get around these things. Anyway, yesterday on Reddit, I came across somebody who had posted a chart about the statistics from the December JLPT. And I'm going to put it on the screen here too, but I want to run off a few things that I found quite interesting before it led me into something else. So, in December of last year, there were a total of 1,036,000 applicants for the JLPT test. Yet only 876,000 seemed to take the test. Now, this is quite a big number. 1 million people just for the December test. And then a little Gemini search tells me that in 2025 total, 1.94 million people took the test. Now, I can kind of trust this because it does break down the session and the December number matches the one from the table, so I can only assume that that's probably correct. So basically, 2 million people here or there took the JLPT test in 2025. That is a very, very big number. A very, very big number. Now, it is broken up into different levels. So let's have a look. So interestingly, the lowest taken test is the N5, the easiest test. Now, I'm going to assume that's because it's worthless. If you take the N5, it's not going to give you anything. N4, again, is the second lowest. It might just be a practice for the exam. N3, you might be able to get away with working for some companies with N3 if you already have a visa in Japan, like a spousal or something like that. And N2 is, of course, the biggest. Now, this was before the visa changes were announced. So even this is showing how big it is. And a point to note that in 2026 for the July exam, they had to close applications because there were too many. The other interesting thing is the highest percentage rate of passing was the N5 with only 50%. Now, if you've ever taken the N5 JLPT exam, it is very, very basic. Very, very basic. So if you fail that exam, and to be honest, I did know a guy who failed it despite living in Japan for like 4 or 5 years. And he would always use Japanese in the lessons when he wasn't supposed to, which is kind of ironic. However, looking at N1 and N2, there are a total of over 400,000 people who passed the N2 and N1 in 2025, just the December exam. So if we can imagine it might be similar, almost 1 million people became N2 level or higher certified. That's a lot of people who have Japanese proficiency, considering how many foreigners live in Japan. But this got me thinking. The exam price went up to 7,500 yen. Now, this test is done all over the world, and actually there were more applicants outside Japan than in Japan. And I did check around. Some countries charge just like the equivalent of like $25 in India. However, China charges around $60 and the US goes up to $100. So I'm going to average it around to about $50, like 7,500 yen for the Japanese one. It's around $50-ish as of making this video. I'm going to assume that the average might be around $50, if not a little bit less, because I'm sure there's a lot of people taking the test in India. If you've ever used LinkedIn, there's a lot of Japanese language experts from India who seem to have just N3 level. That's neither here nor there. That's for a different time. However, if we were to take this number, almost 2 million people taking the test, that's around $100 million in revenue for this language exam. Now, the test has remained largely unchanged since I started taking it. The first time I took it was in 2014. I took N5 and N4. Then I took N3 in 2015, and then I finished N2 in 2017, I believe. And the test has remained largely unchanged since then. So that $100 million, where does it go? Which is the first thing that I thought. Because when I googled the company, it seems to be a not-for-profit. And it uses the money for things like investments, but also it's used for scholarships for people who come to Japan to study. Now, 100 million is a lot. Now, I'm sure they have to pay a lot of stuff for that. Taxes and stuff like that, material fees, people to create the exams. However, you might think the staff and building costs would cost a lot too. Now, I don't think that's true, and I'm pretty sure that it's actually not as much as you would think. The reason that I know this is because when I was the principal of an international school, we used to hold the Eiken exams, which is kind of like the English equivalent to the JLPT. And the way that the Eiken test would work is we would use the school to host the Eiken exams, and we were allowed to keep a portion of the income. Now, it was about 10% of the total income of the test. So if we had about $1,000 of income, we would keep 100 and pass that 900 to the Eiken test. Now, that's not a lot of intake for us, like 10%-ish. And if the JLPT is similar, I can imagine that that's still, okay, maybe $10 million goes to the staffing costs for the test. That's still a lot of money being left. Now, I'm not going to pretend that these numbers are completely accurate. I'm not going to pretend that anything I'm saying is true. It's all speculation. It's all curiosity. Because I'm sure maybe somebody who has better searching skills than me can figure this out a little more. Now, what I did do a little digging into is the JEES. This is the company that runs the JLPT. And I found out that, as I mentioned earlier, they give out scholarships to people who come to Japan. Now, I found a couple of these scholarships. So the first scholarship was just to provide financial support to self-funded international students who demonstrate outstanding performance in the JLPT test and are pursuing studies in Japanese language and Japanese studies whilst facing financial hardship. Now, that's a little bit of an oxymoron because they're pursuing Japanese language studies. However, they have to have a good score in the JLPT test to receive it in the first place. Now, it says, as a side note, for N1 applicants, a score of 150 is required, or 100 or higher for those whose native language is not Korean or Chinese. So they've kind of figured out that Chinese people or Korean people have an advantage because the barrier becomes much higher. So if you ever think, God, Chinese people have it lucky when taking the JLPT exam, well, the JES agrees with you because they must understand that it is easier for them. And I would imagine for the people passing the JLPT N1 exam, most of them are probably going to be Chinese. So the scholarship is worth 50,000 yen a month, and it's used for up to 2 years. So that is 1.2 million yen scholarship for one person. Now, if the test is 7,500 yen, that means 130 people's test fees are being used as a scholarship for one person. Is that good or not? I have no idea. Is that a good use of money? I don't know. Does it make you think that the test fee should be higher so that they should support people more? It's really up to you. Do I think that my test fee should go up so that I can fund other people to come to Japan? I don't know if that's a good thing or not. And actually, I'm gonna Google the JLPT price increase now to see. The JLPT price increase effective in various regions, including Japan, is primarily driven by rising operational costs, inflationary pressures, and the need to maintain stable test administration. but the income is like close to $100 million. And they're definitely not using that for the test. Because if you've taken the test multiple times, you will know that questions are repeated, the question papers are marked by a computer, and I don't think that they're spending that much. If they were to say, okay, we want to give more sponsorships and scholarships to people to come to Japan, I think people might be a bit more accepting of that. And again, this is all speculation on my part. The increased costs were also because fewer people took the exam during the pandemic restrictions. But now we have more people taking it than ever. 2 million people took it in 2025. Does that mean our test costs are going to go down again now that you've got a surplus of people taking the test? I also found another scholarship called the JEES Ishibashi Foundation Scholarship, JEES Sponsor Crown Scholarship. And it's for people who are doing graduate research, master's degrees, doctorates, and stuff like that. And this scholarship, again, is for 2 years, but pays 150,000 yen per month. Now, that, I'm not a mathematician, but that might be around 3.6 million yen, just off the top of my head. Actually, your scholarship is almost the same as a ALT salary. So rather than becoming an ALT, you should try and get a doctorate in Japan and have the JES sponsor you to do so. There is a testimonial on the JES website to say that he is glad to receive this scholarship because he has many financial pressures and he's exhausted from his labor-driven work, his manual labor work. Therefore, this provides a kind of puncture in terms of the pressure that he feels, and it will help him out a lot. Now, that's all well and good. He's from Myanmar. I don't exactly know how much money people in Myanmar have. And it's nice that people like that can be supported. I do wonder the ethics of increasing prices of exams and having almost 2 million people take that exam, charging $50, receiving $100 million in income without us actually knowing exactly where it all goes. Now, their financial data might be out there. I'm sure it's probably out there somewhere with great details. So somebody with better searching skills might find that and dig in a little bit more. Does knowing that the JLPT money being used as sponsorship or scholarship money, does that change how you feel about the test? Knowing that the income for the test is like $100 million for 1 year, does that make you feel different about the test? Please let you know. As for me, I'm probably not going to take the JLPT ever again. Not because of this, but just because I got the N2 like 10 years ago. I worked in a Japanese company for 7 years. I don't think I need to prove my Japanese level to anybody anymore. I have a permanent residency visa. I'm self-employed. It's not really massively relevant to me. However, I am going to be taking the Chinese HSK exam in July. But that also makes me wonder, okay, where's that money going? Maybe I have to dig a little bit into that too. Let me know what you think, guys. Thanks all for watching. I'll see you all next time.